We're now ready to begin our third panel of the day, Taiwan Energy Resilience Dialogue, examining U.S.-Japan-Taiwan energy security cooperation through Taiwan Strait war games and the Ukraine experience. This session provides a deep dive into Taiwan's energy resilience strategies, integrating data analysis, scenario simulations, wargame insights, and first-hand lessons from the conflict in Ukraine. Please join me in welcoming our moderator and speakers to the stage. May we have all the audience to welcome all the speakers on the stage with a warm applause. Thank you. Dr. Lu, the floor is yours.
Okay, hi everyone. I know someone is coming into the venue. I will start it very slowly. So my name is Tsai Lu. I'm the director of the Energy Security and Climate Resilience Program at Dset. And today, we're very honored to have our speakers with us today to talk about Taiwan's energy security under contingency. And we both know that actually the ways to test out or to understand what is actually a Taiwan crisis or a Taiwan Strait crisis is through war games and tabletop exercises. These are the forms that we can actually simulate or to think about what is the worst case scenarios and to test out the existing mechanisms and crisis responses. Would that work in that scenario? And also to find rooms for improvement. And so that's how I would like to structure today's discussion, because we have speakers from CSIS. We have Mark Cancian. He is the senior director of the program that's doing all these war games on Taiwan's Strait crisis scenarios, and especially from an energy perspective. So we will look forward to his comments on this matter. And we also have our Japanese speaker, our Admiral Take. Admiral Take-san, he has also did a lot of war games on the Taiwan Strait crisis now, especially in terms of how exactly the Japanese government should react and how Taiwan can sustain that crisis. And we also if we wanted to understand how we do this crisis responses, we have to learn from Ukraine. So today, we're also very honored to have our speakers from Ukraine, Anton. Anton is the co-founder and also the vice president of the Dixi Group. Dixi Group is a very important energy think tank based in Ukraine. And he will today also share his experiences and also his understanding of how exactly on the front line, how this Ukraine wartime resilience, energy resilience experiences can teach Taiwan some lessons. And finally, but not least, today we have our vice president of Thai Power Company, our vice president Wu. He's with us today and to share with us how exactly Thai Power Company has already have some contingency plans and also strategies trying to strengthen our Taiwan's power system and also its energy infrastructure. So by saying that, I would like to kick off today's discussion by sharing some of the studies that my team's been doing, because we're trying to understand how exactly Taiwan's energy security will look like under a contingency scenario. And we all know that since 2022, the PRC has been doing all these military exercises surrounding Taiwan. And this is a very significant approach in terms of potential blockade or a further step of full-scale invasion. But an additional point to that, how exactly this could be a signal for blockade is we saw from Ukraine, is that before the forced invasion, Russia's invasion into Ukraine, Russia actually implemented a large-scale maritime naval exercises in the Sea of Azov, and that quickly turns into blockade and then turn into full-scale invasion. So we need to think about this and to factoring that and to understand how exactly the PRC is doing since 2022. And one of the key points that the PRC want to do is trying to exhaust Taiwan's limited energy stockpile, especially in terms of our LNG stockpile. So people's been doing or understand that Taiwan has its limited stockpile as, for example, our LNG stockpile is right now is approximately 11 days of usage. And then we have our coal stockpiles for like 40 days, and oil we have longer times. And people will say, so under that scenario, if there is a blockade, like no ships coming into Taiwan, then how long can Taiwan survive? People will say maybe then just 11 days that we will run out our LNG and we don't have electricity. But that is not true because there is a lot of resilient measures that Taiwan already has. For example, if there's a crisis scenario like blockade, last year, the chairman then has already said that they will cut the power supply to even only 1/3 compared to the original level. So if that's a power demand, like the power demand the curve will look like in a scenario cases, then actually Thai Power Company can also utilize its coal-fired generators to support to continue to support electricity in this scenario. So in a combination of renewables, especially solar and coal, that could actually support 80% of Taiwan's power system. Yes. So if this is a coordination of this power mix, then actually Taiwan can survive for months. So this is definitely not just a 11 days crisis, but we have to think about if this can actually prolong to months, how exactly we can do, or to think about it another way, how this potential blockade will have impact on the shipping industry and also the maritime economy in this region. So my team actually done another analysis to see that every day, since we used the last year's data, every day we have 1,400 cargo vessels sailing through the Taiwan Strait. And these vessels, 11.7% of that is actually containers. If we point out all these containers with highest economic values, and we can calculate the potential economic loss because of the charter rate if they got stopped in the Taiwan Strait blockade scenario, then actually the disruption will inflict over 3.53 million in losses on container shipping. And this is only just about 11% of that cargo vessels, right? But if we look into the 1,400 cargo vessels, we can see that if they got stopped, a one-day closure of the Taiwan Strait, and that would disrupt the routes of 74.3% of the cargo vessels, and forcing others around 21% to add a combined of 24,951 kilometers to their journeys. Which means, what does this number mean? This number means that this will cause additional fuel cost and also further delays in terms of its deliveries of goods and also energies. And this is not just talking about Taiwan. We are talking about the foreign vessels that are actually carrying cargoes to China, to Japan, and to South Korea. So actually, we can see that China's recent maritime coercion and also the potential blockade, that would be a regional shared common challenges in this region. And then how about the energy parts? We also look into the LNG vessels that probably will be affected in a crisis scenario, but because Taiwan hasn't actually experienced a actual blockade or quarantine before, so we used the previous exercises that PRC has done. For example, this one is last December. We saw PRC done this justice mission, and they will also, like the last time, they will list out all these zones that will do live fire exercises. And last one, this actually lasts 8 hours, only 8 hours of the live fire exercises. So ships were starting to derail because of the exercise. And that 8 hours interruption actually caused, if you see from your right-hand side, this is the ship sailing to Japan. And the 8 hours interruption actually caused 2 days of delays of their LNG delivery to Japan. So like I said, this would be a major, there would be a major impact on Japan and also South Korea and also this region to threaten its energy security in general. And I'm not talking just about one-time exercises. If you see from 2022, the impact actually even more severe because the red zones just directly overlapped the major routes to South Korea and Japan. So in general, I think we need a whole society efforts to enhance Taiwan's energy security, and not just because this is for Taiwan's sake, but also from a regional contingency perspective, this also matters. I will turn back to my recommendations maybe later through the discussion, but now I would like to turn to Mark. If you can share some of your experiences with your war game, the results, how do you see the Taiwan Strait crisis, and what's your assessment on that? That would be very helpful.
Well, thank you very much. I spent many years in the Pentagon, and as a result, I cannot speak without PowerPoint slides. So I have a number of them. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the methodology and the structure of the war game. We'll talk about that later, but I want to get to the key elements. Just a quick overview. It was an independent war game. We ran it actually 26 times, so we could look at a wide variety of scenarios. And it was a team of 3 principal investigators. And you may notice that 2 of the names are very similar. Mark Cancian and Matthew Cancian. Matthew is my younger son. The scenario is very much like what we just heard. That is, the blockade begins with China imposing a restricted zone around Taiwan, requiring that all shipping going into Taiwan be inspected and approved by China. Taiwan refuses. What you're going to see is the scenarios, and what we did is we had a 4x4 matrix for China's escalation and U.S.-Taiwan escalation, and where those came together, those were the different scenarios. So it goes from very low level, that is China's maritime militia harassing, all the way up to full-scale conflict. There were 3 modules. One of them, the first one, was about the ships that were available, looking at the world market and what's available to Taiwan and the U.S. The second piece looked at the convoy battles that occurred as ships were trying to arrive at Taiwan. Third, which is most important here, looks at the effect of imports on Taiwan's energy supply and economy. You can see the inputs here and the outputs. What we did is to build a model of the Chinese economy and energy environment. This is a little corner of it. I know it's very hard to read. We were able to leverage a lot of the information that came from Taipower, which was very, very helpful. Okay, now we can get into the results. The first result here, you can see, is the economic activity as a level of imports. So at 100%, of course, everything is operating. But as the level of imports goes down from 80 to 60, 20, 40, 20, then Taiwan has to squeeze what gets energy. And it's important to have a rationing system like that. And I know Taiwan does have a system like that. And that's critical and probably needs to be strengthened, because if you don't have a rationing system, it's going to be a free-for-all where the most powerful and the wealthiest get energy and others don't, and those may not be the most important for this society and economy. And you can see here we have an allocation scheme. The health of the population is the top priority. Chips are pretty high up there, but things like construction and consumer goods go out early. In an absolute blockade, this may be a little hard to read, but that is, if nothing gets in, what would happen to Taiwan? And what happened for 2 weeks, everything is fine. There are adequate inventories. After that, the natural gas inventory runs out, so the amount of energy that is available goes down by about a third. It stays at that level until I think it's week 9 when the coal reserves run out. And then after that, the oil will run out. The food turns out not to be a problem. Taiwan has some, of course, domestic production and has large inventories, so the population will not starve. You may be eating a lot of rice after a couple of months, but the population won't starve. A couple of recommendations. The first one is about shipping and having a cadre of ships available that can be used in a blockade, and that means in a situation where there is danger. We're seeing in the Gulf now that on their own, shipping companies will not accept very much danger. Preparing the infrastructure, and this is probably the most important for our purposes here. Of course, Taiwan has been building energy reserves. I know Taipower is continuing to do that, very important. One problem, of course, is that moving towards a green energy approach may be good for the environment. It's very hard on resilience. Hardening the energy infrastructure, very important against potential Chinese attack. All right, this is for the United States here, and I just wanted to take 2 minutes here. 1 minute. These are the 3 projects we've done, one on invasion with nuclear weapons, and one on blockade, and it's the one on blockade that we're mostly talking about here. And in fact, this is a copy of it right here. It's online, as you can see there, and I am giving a copy. And the last thing I wanted to talk about was the Strait of Hormuz, because that is having a very immediate impact on Taiwan and, in fact, the entire world. A couple of points I want to make up here. Both sides, of course, are imposing blockades. We're at a stalemate. There is, I think, a possible deal on the table, but both sides are refusing to compromise. Keep in mind that things that can't go on forever don't. This is going to be resolved. It will not last forever. And the final point, 2 final points. One is the United States now has enough military power that it could push convoys through the strait if it were willing to accept the casualties that go with that. So far, we have not been willing to do that. And the final point is that this is a major failure for the U.S. Navy. They've been thinking about this for 45 years. The moment came, they were not able to execute, and that's, I think, a failure in what was otherwise a very successful military operation, putting aside the politics. And with that, I will turn the microphone over.
Yes, thank you, Mark. Very good presentation. I will come back with you some questions later on shipping and also, of course, renewable energy's role, because I think people, or the TPC, Taiwan has a very different pathway that you just described, may not as you expected, but we can talk about that later. But now I would like to turn to our Admiral Take-san. Take-san used to be is the senior fellow of the Sasaki Peace Foundation and also the admiral of the 32nd Chief of Staff Japan Maritime Self-Defense Force. So the floor is yours, please, Admiral.
Thank you very much. So I'd like to discuss implications of policy simulation hosted by Japan Forum for Strategic Studies for Taiwan Energy Policy. Since 2021, the JFSS has conducted 4 role-playing type simulations, for which I designed the scenarios. To design these scenarios, I references the US and Japanese literatures and simulation report, including CSIS, as well as a recent strategic development to ensure that the scenario would meet political interest for coping with Taiwan contingencies. The screen shows a part of scenario outline that we planned last year. The scenario structure is based on China's theory of victory as outlined in the book of Dr. Brad Roberts of the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratories. The scenario consists of 3 parts. As for Turn 1, over the years, China seeks to create a favorable international environment prior to invading Taiwan, and a major earthquake of Taiwan East Coast triggered a gradual escalation of tension in Taiwan Strait, ultimately leading to the Taiwan crisis. The second turn is a transition from peacetime to conflict. China will employ various strategies to deter the United States and its allies from intervening in Taiwan. Recent analysis of the Taiwan contingencies have focused on scenarios in which China isolates Taiwan from the outside world. Our simulation adapted this approach in Turn 3, escalation to armed conflict. In its effort to reunify Taiwan, China will seek to non-military means whenever possible. However, Taiwan resistance will cause the operation to escalate into war. China will conduct operations in accordance with military strategic principles, such as exploiting the vulnerabilities of target country. The simulation focused on Japan and Taiwan. Both countries are densely populated island nations whose survival and prosperity depends heavily on overseas trade. This means both countries share the twin strategic vulnerabilities, low self-sufficiency rate of energy and food, and depend on the lines of communication. If China were to attempt to exert strategic pressure on Japan and Taiwan, this twin strategic vulnerability would naturally be a target. So furthermore, Taiwan's economy is overly dependent on the semiconductor industry. If the power supply becomes unstable or the import of the critical materials is disrupted, Taiwanese economy would suffer serious consequences immediately. The semiconductor industry is a double-edged sword. Strategic strength in the peacetime can turn into weakness in time of war. To ensure that the strengths do not become a weakness, the government will need to prioritize national interest that must be protected during the crisis. And given these characteristics, the Taiwan contingency would be a war at sea, with Taiwan as the strategic objectives and attack on vulnerabilities as an operational objective. In other words, protecting maritime traffic would significantly influence the outcome of Taiwan contingencies. So consequently, one of the objectives of the policy simulation was to ensure the continuity of the business activity, BCP, during a crisis from the perspective of economic security, and numerous related scenarios were established as shown on the screen. This simulation focused in particular on the disruption of energy import, which are difficult to stockpile. LNG-fired power generation account for a significant portion in Japan's energy mix. And the generation would decline by 32% within 14 days. One of the key findings of the fourth simulation in 2024 was the comprehensive defense capabilities require the consideration of economic and fiscal strengths. The two other important findings are strengthen nuclear power generation to increase energy self-sufficiency and strengthen the defense of sea lines of communication in cooperation with countries bordering important energy transport routes from peacetime. In order to withstand contingencies and maintain the status quo, Taiwan must implement domestic policies that mitigate geopolitical vulnerabilities before a contingency becomes real. Whether it involves the blockade or the invasion, war against China would inevitably become total war for Taiwanese people. Fighting a total war requires industrial mobilization plan like the Ukraine implemented. This plan must be continuously revised to adapt to change of industrial structure and social life. Training for implementation ensure that plan can be activated without confusion. Third is the preparation for commerce ready. It takes a long time for blockade or quarantine to take effect. If the desired results are not achieved, the measures could escalate into disruption, maritime traffic, and commerce raiding. Taiwan has been strengthening its multi-layered defense system to counter the invasion from the mainland China for decades. However, judging from the composition of Taiwanese Navy's order of battle, it seems insufficient to protect maritime traffic. Thank you very much. This is the end of my presentation.
Thank you, Admiral Taki. I think I will come back with you because we all agree that to protect the sea lines of communication, which you all, you reiterated that very much in your recent visit to Taiwan. And we all agree that it's very important and we need to find out the measures to do that. And I know that, Mark, actually in your report, you point out that we can learn from the U.S. military's program in terms of visa to have actually mobilized some vessels that could be join these kind of exercises and to prepare for potential to protect the sea lines of communication. So we'll come back to the discussion with both of you. And then now I would like to turn to Anton. Now we are looking into Ukraine's wartime, the frontline experiences, and how exactly you think that Taiwan can learn from Ukraine. Thank you. Sorry, the ping.
Well, thank you very much for this honor to be here, and thank you for the interest to Ukrainian case. I commend to Dset for the not only the inside dive into the topic, but also the ability to connect various topics that have a lot of common as we learned today. So I work for one of the Ukrainian energy think tanks. Ukraine has quite a vibrant civil society, as you may know, and Dixi Group is one of the first and biggest think tanks in the country. We are lucky to be able to operate since 2008, and we've done the research on the lessons learned from the ongoing war in the energy sector. We started monitoring the situation from the very early days, and I'm happy to offer some of the lessons. We came up with, I think, the total of 11. I will not stop on each and every of them, but I would offer you to look at the study itself and then dive deeper. So Russia has been waging a war on Ukraine long before the full-scale invasion. They've been trying to deprive our country of various types of resources and accesses, be it gas or oil or nuclear power. That all has been blocked sometime in the history, so Ukraine has been fighting its way to the independence in the energy sector long years. But what you see on this current graph is basically the time scale of the full-scale invasion. We have broken this into phases, but please remember those phases just are dubbed with some key features, but they all share the same feature, that is multi-crisis. So there was no one-time attack or single type of attack on energy that existed. All these phases are characterized by the combination of various implications. They started with the big-scale installations of thermal power plants and fuel logistics, as you see. Then they turned to the massive terror. Sometime in between, they also occupied Chernobyl power plant, which was not producing, but the plant was there, and they also occupied Zaporizhzhia power plant. So Chernobyl was deoccupied afterwards, but Zaporizhzhia remains the largest nuclear power plant that is occupied. That is 6 gigawatts of electricity installed. I will not go through each phase. I will just say that now they are turning to scorched earth approach, and they are also looking at water, at logistics, at sewage. So doing everything that doesn't have direct military sense, but has a lot of civilian damage. My bad. Sorry, I got too engaged with them. Changing the slide. All right. Now again. Yeah, thank you. So the first lesson that we spotted from the early days was big installations, overly centralized, because the bigger the dependency, the bigger the sensitivity of it. And it also impacts the regions, so it may as well leave some of the regions with local deficits, which is the problem, and people start suffering right there. So reducing the strategic dependencies on the overly centralized generation would be our first lesson learned. So here you see on the graph how the situation changed for different type of fuels, starting with nuclear power plant, and there you clearly see the loss of one nuclear power plant. That drop is exactly 6 gigawatt that were lost. And then on the left-hand side, you can see the renewables that amount to almost the same capacity as nuclear power plant, but we were able to restore, so that fluctuates. And the most damage, as you see, was made to thermal power plants, gas power plants, as well as hydropower plants, and I will shortly tell why. I'll skip that. Before I turn to speaking about that type of plants, I will also stop on the other vulnerability on the centralized systems, that having that centralized system would instantly mean you have to transfer big amounts of electricity across the country, and those transfer lines and nodes become your another vulnerability. So some of the solutions we see as basically doing modular applications, being able to easily and fastly scale up, making sure your regions can be self-sufficient in times when system can break down and dissolve into the islands. Maintaining links to the grid is of utmost importance, but prioritize and distributed generation, making a lot of sense for communities and localities, is our, I'd say, #1 lesson here. Something I touched upon is flexible generation. So you see the impacts on actually the gas-fired power plants in one of some stations, I believe. So the flexible generation is what keeps system running when you have instant increase of the load, when people switch on a lot of lights in the morning or in the afternoon, whereas the heavy load on, for example, cooling, that's where your flexible generation works. And one of the heaviest strikes was and still continues to be on the flexible generation. Another thing is grid. Grid availability is a massive issue. You can have whatever generation possible, but you may have no grid available or grid connectivity available to actually get the electricity to the customer. And that's what happens. And then on the multi-crisis, as this winter showed us, there are a lot of implications once the power is out. There is immediate heating result, there's immediate water result, communications, and so on and so forth. So unfortunately, we learned it hard way, and we have to react. So doing emergency repairs, rewiring, doing the reconfiguration of the network and the substations, and actually living in the crisis. What we would do differently is basically plan it by resilience by design way. So bringing more distributed generation, making more stocks of the spare parts, making sure the grids are smart and easily and quickly repairable is one of the solutions, but also being ready in terms of regulation to make sure that it is available and readily to implement. And I sincerely hope that you will have it all good prepared, but will never need it in practice. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anton. That was a really comprehensive and important lessons for Taiwan for sure. And I will come back with many questions because my team is also publishing a report on how Taiwan can learn from Ukraine's wartime resilience. And we have actually come with the similar situations, suggestions like you mentioned. So I would love to delve into that later. But now I would like to turn to our Vice President Wu. If you can share how exactly Thai Power Company, what is the recent efforts in terms of enhancing the power grid and also learning lessons from Ukraine to protect Taiwan against potential interruptions from physical or cyber attacks, malicious attacks. So please.
谢谢主持人。那很高兴今天有这个机会，在这个地方跟大家分享有关台电公司在稳定供电，还有提升台湾的一个电力供应的一个安全这方面的一个努力。好，那我们知道今年的2月28号这个波斯湾发生战争以来，那对台湾影响最大的大概就是我们来自卡达的天然气可能会暂时没有办法供应台湾。那在这样的情况底下，台湾中油公司也积极在国际上呢来做现货的采购，来确保台湾的一个天然气的一个供应呢不会发生问题。那到目前为止，也确实因为台湾中油公司的努力呢，我们没有因为中东的战事让我们的天然气发电受到任何的影响。但是我们还是要针对这样的一个可能的一个发生在台湾周边，如果有一个封锁情况发生的话，那我们怎么样来确保韧性的一个提升跟稳定电力的供应？那在我今天的报告要分几个部分，第一个跟大家讲，我们台湾目前的电源的装置容量大概是60个 gigawatt，60个 gigawatt 大概是6000万千瓦。那在这样的组成里面呢，实际上最大的一个占比呢，大概是我们的再生能源再生能源已经是最大的占比。那第二个部分当然就是天然气，跟第三个部分是燃煤。那在整个去年2025年的一个年发购电量里面呢，大概是2584亿度。那天然气的占比是比较高的那燃煤是第二名那整个再生能源大概是14.7%那这样的结果，当然我们是采用让再生能源能够极大化，然后让天然气能够尽量发电，燃煤尽量去减少这并不是我们燃煤的最大的供电能力，其实我们是在燃煤做一个减煤的一个发电那在整个台湾电网的部分，其实台湾算是电网密度是非常高的我们在有限的土地面积里面，但是我们有很多的一个线路，不管是架空的线路或地下的一个馈线，还有变压器，这个密度都是非常高的。那在整个电力的储备部分，刚刚前面3位的讲者呢，其实都给我们一个很重要的，就是自备能源的重要性所以我们国产的能源呢，主要的部分呢，就再生能源包括太阳光电。那到目前为止，统计到今年的4月份，我们大概有1534万千瓦。那风力发电呢，大概是500万千瓦，水力发电是212。另外，我们还有准备的储能呢，超过200万千瓦，这个还持续在增加当中。那整个燃料的储备法定的这个存煤量安全大概是30天那以台电公司呢，目前我们的存量呢可以达到40天以上。那天然气呢，法定的存量今年大概是11天。中油公司呢，在 夏天在我们目前这段时间呢，都能够维持在12天以上，这个是不会有问题的。但是除了这个现有运转中的这个化石燃料的机组，包括天然气的机组、燃煤的机组，过去台湾为了要做一些环保的改善，我们有一些除役的燃煤机组呢，现在我们还是把它转换成一个紧急备用的机组。所以将来我们在应对整个海峡的封锁跟紧张的一个情况底下呢，我们可以让这些紧急备用的机组呢，还是可以投入到我们整个供电的一个行列，来提升我们整体的供电能力。那除此之外，还有民间的这些自备发电机，也可以透过我们电力交易平台的方式来支援我们电力系统的供应。那接下来是谈到韧性，因为除了电力的生产要足够之外，其实输送的网络还要确保它的安全。那刚刚大家都谈到呢韧性，那韧性其实有2个部分，第一个是我们怎么样来提升我们电网的强度。那过去我们经历了几个大的一个停电事故，包括2021年的513，2022年的这个303哈，这些事故以后呢，我们发现台湾的电网过去是以集中式的，那我们现在必须要采更分散的一个方式来进行，所以稍后我会再做一个说明。那另外，我们乌克兰的专家也讲到呢，我们要有一个多层的一个保护的一个机制，这个部分我们其实也积极在落实。那这个保护的机制不一定是只有我们过去所讲电网的保护电力而已，实际上还有治安，这个治安的部分我们也非常的重视。那再来一个就是我电网如果面临一个紧急的一个状况的时候，那我怎么样来确保这样的一个稳定跟韧性呢？当然就是我们要做一个全黑的一个启动，还有跨区的融通。那最重要的是我们每年都在实际的一个进行的一个演练跟动员呢，就是我们碰到一个损害的时候，怎么样来在最短的时间能够复原来恢复供电。因为台湾每年都会碰到一个台风，我们去年的丹纳斯台风对我们南部地区的电网造成很大的冲击。那台电呢这样的一个动员呢，我们在很短的时间里面呢，恢复90%以上的供电。那国外的专家告诉我们，同样的状况发生在国外，可能是1-2个月以后才有可能恢复供电了。好，那在这个整个的一个电网的一个韧性里面呢，我们有2个主题，第一个就是我们直接供应给重要的科学园区，然后干线的容量呢留给我们民生的用电，还有我们的再生能源呢，尽量来提供给当地来使用。那第2个部分呢，我们还要建立一个韧性的据点哈，因为我们知道这一个传统的电网呢是很容易受到攻击跟外部的一个军事的一个破坏，所以我们也建立很多的一个微型的电网哈。那这个在国家能源署有规划，大概全国会有160处。那台电公司呢，除了我们自己的微电网之外，我们也协助来布建了9处的一个防灾型微电网。那这个是作为一个示范系统呢，让各级的地方政府能够迅速的去来建立这些微电网，来因应我们在紧急状况的时候还能够确保的一个供电。那再来就是我们关键基础设施的硬体防护。其实我们知道，除了电源的电网的一个本身故障，我们必须要确保能够快速恢复之外呢，我们还防范一些外部可能的攻击。所以我们先盘点我们哪些是一个关键的基础设施，然后每年要做定期的盘点跟演练。在重要的一个设施呢，我们来加强它的安全防护，包括增建电子围篱，而且增派了我们的保安警力进来。另外最重要，有关于无人机的一个攻击，我们也建立无人机的一个预警跟防卫的系统。那也有一个双备援，彼此邻近的这些关键基础设施，怎么样做电力融通跟备援，这个我们每年都有在做一个定期的演练跟检视。另外就资通的一个资通安全呢，我们分2个部分，以我们能源关键基础设施就是 IT 的部分跟 OT 的部分， 我们逐步建立 SAC 做7×24的这样的一个及时的一个监控。那我们也同时跟国际友好的国家呢进行一个治安的一个合作跟训练，来强化我们本身的一个治安的防御能力。那另外一个就是我们电网真的如果发生了一个状况的时候，没有办法按照原来正常情况调度，我们必须做跨区的支援跟全黑启动。这个我们每年也都是在不同的一个供电区域呢，都有一个演练跟一个定期的一个演习。再来就是电力的融通，电力融通，我们如果在发生紧急状况底下，我们会针对每一个变电所必要的负载，所谓的必要负载就是政府还有我们军事单位、国防单位，再来就是民生工业的这些负载，还有以及我们民生的一个最基本的用电需求，这些我们都会尽量来确保。那另外配合刚刚前面所讲的防灾型微电网的部分呢，我们来支援呢这些民生的一些用电。另外就是要跟大家报告了，其实我们每年台电公司呢不是演习，我们是每年都在动员，每年都来检讨，每年都在验证我们紧急应变的能力到底够还不够。所以我们这样的一个配电系统的一些准备跟抢修呢，我们从过去的一些应变呢，大概从2019年到去年为止呢，我们整个的一个停电的次数大概降低了65%。那我们的做法呢，大概就是在每一次的一个每年在这个台风来临以前，我们就会去盘点我们所需要的这些备品、这些器材，然后可动员的人力、物力等等。在每一次台风在来临以前呢，它的一个警戒区域呢，我们就先提升了相关的一些这些备品的一些供给，然后非警戒区域的一些资源的一些抢修能力呢，就会进驻到台风区域这边来做一个，万一有电网的一个损害的时候，能够快速的复原。那每年都透过这样的一个实际的操作呢，我们累积了很多的经验。那最后我要做一个结论哈，台电公司肩负了全台稳定电力供应的一个任务，那我们一定会尽所有的努力来确保我们国家电力的供应稳定跟安全。那另外呢，我们也会持续提升我们整体电力系统，包括电源还有电网韧性，同时检视呢多元的一个电力储备的策略，来因应呢这个非常时期的一个状况，我们都还能够持续的一个运作。那当然，近期的一个中东的战事呢，导致我们这一个燃料的供应还有能源价格的上涨。那中油公司呢，跟台电公司密切合作，来紧急采购足额的这些天然气，来满足我们发电的需求。那台电公司也会同时来盘点呢各种紧急的一个备用机组，同时呢机动调度民间的一些这个机组的发电，来强化我们供电的一个韧性。以上是我在第一阶段的一个报告，谢谢。
谢谢吴副。我知道大家都等一下 I know everyone has a lot of questions I wanted to ask our panelists, but I wanted to utilize my privilege as the moderator to ask some questions before. 吴副，我可以先讲中文没关系，中文没关系。吴副，我知道因为你其实也是数位长，就是台电的数位长，所以其实刚刚您已经有提到说在资安防护的部分，台电已经做了非常多的演练，然后目前都有在做准备。我在想说，在这方面，因为我们刚刚其实在乌克兰的经验里面，乌克兰所遭受它的变电站也是第一波俄罗斯开始做第一步开始全面入侵乌克兰的时候，它第一步发动的也是 cyber attacks， 也是资安攻击，也许是特别是用 industrial 这样的软体去就是有去干扰到他们现在的用电，在变电站这部分。所以我想要说，请你分享一下目前台电你目前所看到的中共或者是各种的来自外部的资安攻击，在目前台电系统面临的状况是怎么样，以及你们现在的一些 contingency planning 是什么？
好，谢谢。这个是一个很严肃的问题，也是非常重要的问题。我跟大家报告，我们台电公司每天遭受到的一些骇客的一个攻击呢，平均是3万次，平均是3万次。如果在一些关键的、比较敏感的时刻，这个次数会更高哈。以 大概3年前那个美国裴洛西议长来的时候，我们在3天里面呢，面临的一个治安的攻击呢，超过300万次。所以这个是我们必须要重视的。那台电公司因为是国家的能源关键基础设施列管最多的单位，所以我们投入整个治安的一些工作呢特别的多。那我们治安的一个能源关键基础设施的一个分级，我们分3级，就治安的部分分3级。那在 A、B 级的部分，当然是有国家的单位每年会来做这些检测跟这些治安的一些列管或者是测验。那其实治安没有所谓的一个 A、B、C 级，骇客要攻击都是你最脆弱的，他不会攻击你的 A 级跟 B 级。所以在 C 级的部分呢，台电公司把我们公司内部的一个资源，其实投入在 C 级，也就是最脆弱的这一级哦。我们跟国家的一个治安单位，包括治安院、治安署，还有资通电军合作，每年都会挑不同的一个系统来做治安的一个检测。那到目前为止呢，我们都还持续在精进当中。那我们也很感谢友邦，特别是美国还有英国这边对我们公司的一个协助。我们在很多治安的一些防护的一个技术、治安情资的分享，甚至还有兵推的部分呢，我们都有参与。那借由这些国际合作当中，我们学习到很多最新的一个治安防御的一些知识跟技术。那这些都有助于我们整个能源关键基础设施治安防御能力的一个提升。谢谢。
Okay, thank you, Vice President Wu. Now I would like to turn to Anton. Can I go to my slides? Thank you. Okay, so Anton, like I said, we enjoy your presentation, and because my team's doing a work very related to what you just presented, I would like to ask some questions since you mentioned that what Russia did to Ukraine is not just not just trying to trigger energy crisis. They want to trigger multiple crises. And this is because energy infrastructure is often related to the operation of water systems and also financial systems and everything. So I would like to ask some questions based on this. First is okay, so maybe you can start with, first question is about the centralized power system that you just mentioned. It would be a major vulnerability in terms of wartime circumstances. And this is the map that we gather to see that how exactly Ukraine, the power system of Ukraine suffer from the physical attacks. And these are the numbers of the attacks. And this is specifically the biggest nuclear power plants that's being attacked during the war. And we see that these physical attacks actually happened, not the power system itself, not the nuclear power system, but its substations. So no matter how many nuclear power plants that you have, once your substations got hit, then these nuclear power plants need to be cold shut down, right? So would you say maybe elaborate on a little more on the potential wartime risk of the nuclear power plants and also all other power plants from your perspective?
Well, thank you very much. First, I wanted to thank the International Renaissance Foundation for actually availing us to do the research, because that was quite a research. You should understand the topography of the power station. So if you imagine the generation or the power station to be a bottle, then there is a substation that will be a bottleneck, something that would bring your power into the system and then further to the customer. So that's exactly where the strikes are landed in the case of nuclear power plants, but also in the case of renewable power plants, because it's just easy to shut down a generation unit. You strike the substation. So that's one of the critical nodes, not the only, but one of them. And then the task is to make sure that the substation can either withstand or be quickly repaired. There are also ways Ukraine does it, and first of all, and the easiest would be anti-drone nets. because drones are many times the vehicle to bring destruction. But if the drones are replaced by missiles or ballistics even more, then you need the concrete casing. And that's quite a big deal. So constructing a concrete case means money, time, and many times you cannot cover them because having a nuclear power plant that is big enough means having quite a large number of equipment in the open air. And you can also dig the substation under the ground, but that would drive the cost immensely. And we also have seen the applications of the missiles that would go through the concrete to the certain depths. So you have to make sure that the substation is deep enough for the missiles not to be able to come through. So instead of that, having multiple smaller applications that are located throughout the country close to where the needs are, to where the customers are, makes a lot of sense. But that also takes time to design carefully, project the loads, project where the needs are, and also to be able to do the smart networks, to have all the data, to be able to rewire, to prepare the spare parts, to prepare, as the colleagues here on the stage have mentioned, to prepare the equipment, including cybersecurity, including many things like that. But what we see, if you can do this in a modular way, so quickly being able to quickly scale up, that makes a lot of security sense. And one more thing I'd like to mention, we are very much used in Europe to think in economic feasibility framework, which sometimes does not count for security. So we should change this approach immediately and make sure that we factor this security into this feasibility.
Thank you, Anton. That was a very comprehensive answer. We will come back to you with more questions from the audience. And now I would like to turn to Take-san and Mark about the maritime corridors that we want to secure to make sure that not just that Taiwan can maintain its self-sufficiency in terms of its power system readiness in resilient ways, but we also think about the external deliveries to Taiwan, how exactly we can maybe work together to protect that sea lines of communication. So now maybe my first question is to Take-san. Take-san, I wonder because Taiwanese society, we are all very excited to see Takaichi administration, her recent remarks and also his supportive status to Taiwan position. And I wonder, what's the recent reforms and military posture in Japan that might, in this sense, to help Taiwan, or not just help Taiwan, to help Japan to secure the sea lines of communication in general?
So first of all, after the Prime Minister Takaichi's comment, there is no sign, or Japan does not alter any policy toward China or Taiwan as well. And what the Prime Minister Takaichi mentioned about when Taiwan attacked by military, and also invest all possible information and judge case by case. Japan will execute the survival threatening situation to defend the United States and the other country around there. So the Taiwan location is quite some vicinity of Japan. So I think that Taiwan and Japan and geographical some proximity, so Taiwan contingency is automatically expand to the Japan, because the southernmost the island in Japan and the Taiwan, it is about 110 kilometers, very small, very short. And also around Taiwan, the three important straits that the Japan and Taiwan, the other Taiwan, South Korea, the other countries share, the transport the important materials and energy resources from Middle East to Australia and Southeast Asia. So there's many reasons Japan thinks that Taiwan is a so important country. And in this case, Japan should consider what Japan can contribute or support Taiwan in case of emergencies. You have to consider distinguish between cooperation in the peacetime and wartime. Regularly, we consider this matters in the peacetime operation, but contingency, the situation is more complicated because, so Ukraine, as for the support and supported relation needs, Ukraine and the EU could be the good case. And Ukraine is a party to the dispute, and the EU is not party, but it provides various forms of assistance to the Ukraine, such as energy, food, the weapons, ammunition, and the fiscal assistance. If the Taiwan contingency is considered as an international dispute rather than the domestic issues for China, Taiwan would become a party to the dispute. Neighboring country like Japan would then able to provide various forms of supplies as a country not party to the dispute. But this matter is not discussed until now between Japan and Taiwan. So situation more complicated, is the key difference between Ukraine war and Taiwan contingency is in a Taiwan contingency is the law of the naval warfare applied to all forms of the maritime support. When Japan and the United States want to support Taiwan naturally by sea, we have to consider this case is from the law of naval warfare. And for example, if the merchant ships breaches the blockade in order to transport supply to Taiwan, those goods will be seized if they are classified as contraband of the war. And the government dispatched destroyer to escort merchant ships. It attempts to breach the blockade, the vessel may become subject to attack, and the supporting country will likely become involved in the dispute. So such a consideration should discuss prior to supporting Taiwan. So however, such matters is not discussed between Taiwan and Japan, and also maybe United States and Japan and United States and Taiwan.
I think that's a very key point because like in Ukraine, we see that how Russia has called that any commercial ships are trying to breach the blockade to Ukraine, then that would be seen as a partner in terms of this kind of attacks. So, and that would be seen as comrades with Ukraine and would be the attack target. So I think these kind of discussions should be there in place in advance so that we can facilitate for the cooperation. And now I would like to turn to our Taiwan's also very important allies, the US side. We know that the US just has this bill on the Hill about Taiwan's energy security and Anti-Embargo Act. That actually the act specifies that American flag vessels will have government-backed insurance backstops, and also so will enable them to come to ship deliveries to Taiwan, the LNG specifically. And I wonder, because in your report you said that not only we need these insurance backstops and all these bills to be as a guarantee, but we also need a visa or some kind of mechanisms to help these commercial vessels to be familiar with all these potential escorting efforts or the exercises that can still maintain the continuity of shipping to Taiwan. So I wonder if you can elaborate on that point a little bit more.
Certainly. The way most blockades or blockade running works is that global shipping will go to some port and drop off its cargo, and then that cargo is transferred to ships that will run the blockade. In other words, that are either designed to do that or are expendable or are willing to take the risk of running the blockade. In our model, in our war games, we assumed that that would happen in Japan, which makes Japan, yet again, a critical ally and a critical factor in this potential conflict. The ships that are going into Taiwan, those are the ones that would be subjected to possible Chinese attack. So they would need to be US flagged or Taiwanese flagged. So how do you get enough of those ships that you can then sustain this flow? The United States has a program called Visa, and then there's another one for tankers, I think it's called TTP. And basically the United States has agreements with shipping companies that the United States can call these ships into US service and put them to work notionally for supplying US forces, but it could also be for supplying Taiwan. These would be ships then that would be covered by special insurance so that if they were damaged or destroyed, they would be covered by the US government. The US did something like that during the Second World War, during the First World War also. And to make an aside there on I think an important point, there's always a way to send convoys through a blockade. The question is, how much loss you're willing to take, and escorting them, and convincing the shippers and the crews with incentives, with insurance, to take those risks. But it is possible. The United States did it in the Second World War in the North Atlantic when the losses to ships were very, very high. The United States also has a ready reserve fleet that is notionally, again, for the Department of Defense, but can be called up and used in this kind of circumstance. And we recommended that Taiwan do something like this, at least maybe with some LNG tankers, maybe some older ones that were coming off the market. The United States has programs like that. You buy it, you maintain it so that it can go to sea, but you don't use it. There's some cost, but it's a small cost. And then if there's an emergency, then you could work with one of the companies to use that to bring in, for instance, LNG.
Thank you, Mark. That is very key for Taiwan to do. And I think Taiwanese government has started since 2021. There has a policy called national, to trying to build a national fleet in terms of LNG delivery. So, but of course, that takes time. So how can we make sure that in the short term we have other measures, alternative measures, to make sure to continue the maritime shipping? That is, I think, the next topic that we can discuss further on. Maybe not in this session, but maybe further on in the future. But now I would like to open the floor to the audience, because now we have around actually 20 minutes to have QAs. So we have a lot of questions, a lot of hands, but because my vision is not really good, so please maybe show your hands higher so that I can see you if there's any questions. From the, okay, maybe here. Yes.
Hi, this is Amber from Goose Foundation. I have a question for Thai Power VP. My father retired from Thai Power, so I think in reality at this moment, the CCP is trying to manipulate our energy policy through our parliament, through our CCP proxy legislators, and they make Thai Power look bad. Every month there's a new topic about energy resilience. So my question is, why the Thai Power and Ministry of Economic Affairs say no to TSMC a couple of years back when they wanted to adopt the Silicon Valley model? That is, the manufacturer or the brand company should be responsible for their own power need. Google is in charge of their own power need. Meta is in charge of their own power need. Why Thai Power say no? Because through that, you can turn your responsibility and share it through TSMC. And Taiwanese people, we don't say no to TSMC. We don't say no to Jensen Huang. So why? Thai Power shouldn't be the broker for energy. You should play smart and leverage the brand power of TSMC. You shouldn't carry the responsibility you shouldn't carry. You should let them take charge of renewable energy? Thank you.
Okay, so I think the question is more like how can we better balance the industrial need and also
No. I said, why did you say no to TSMC when they want to
So
be
so I
responsible?
try to reframe your questions better, and then so about that, and I think this is also very key. I mean, for this industrial sector to have its self-sufficient power supply, on-site power supply to counter any kind of interruption. So that's the first question, but we will collect more, and then we can answer that together. So more questions, please. Yes.
Hello. Hi, my name is Ricky. I have two questions. My first question is directed to Vice President Wu, so I'll ask it in Chinese, and I'll ask my second question in English. 吴副总你好，刚刚在您的简报里面有提到说，台电目前有在要加速绿能的这个并网的这个部分，我好奇这个部分具体而言会怎么进行？是加速这个本身审查的时间吗？还是透过一些比如说参考德州的就是 Connect and Manage 先接后管这个模式，或甚至会考虑像电网增效的技术 Grid Enhancing Technologies， 或者是换线的扩容 Reconductoring 这样子，这是第一个问题。My second question is actually related to the initiative that I'm building, which is very relevant to the maritime corridor concept that was mentioned earlier. So, like my initiative was initiated with the observation that a lot of energy importing manufacturers like Taiwan, like South Korea, like Japan are importing not only raw materials but also fossil fuels to make cement, iron, petrochemicals, aluminum, etc. For example, in Taiwan, the iron making industry itself consumes approximately 200 petajoules of energy. That is equivalent to more than 100 semiconductor fabs. So is there a way, instead of like importing the metallurgical coal and the iron ores, have renewable rich producers like Australia turn iron ore electrolytically into iron and then ship it to Taiwan, South Korea, Japan, and other countries. So I'm wondering if any of your respective countries or organizations or models have considered this kind of embodied energy trade concept in enhancing energy security and resilience. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Maybe final questions here? Okay, that.
Please also state your name and affiliation for the audience. Thank you.
Hi there, it's Guy Hale from the British office Taipei. I'm curious, so in the Strait of Hormuz crisis, shipping actually stopped before there was any damage to merchant vessels as a result of loss of confidence from mariners. I'm just curious if the panel thinks there are any steps that Taiwan should be taking now to help build confidence among the community of mariners before a crisis happens.
Thank you. Okay, so now maybe our Vice President Wu, 吴副总，我们现在先回答两个问题，一个就是说，实际上现在我们台电这边怎么样来准备，就是面对这个工业上面的用电的需求，尤其是现在我们知道曾董说，我们接下来这个用电的需求，尤其是来自于 AI 相关的这个半导体相关产业，其实大概到5 GW 以上。那5 MW，那这个部分台电现在的准备是怎么样？那第二个问题可能也是包含刚刚讲的这个再生能源的，现在想要加速这个进程，我们知道说今年可能11月可以达到20% 的这个目标。那接下来怎么样再继续加速，让我们的能源自主性可以再提高？所以麻烦吴副。
好，谢谢。先回答刚刚前面第一位小姐提问的问题哈。您提到的问题其实是能源管理法的问题，这个是法律阶段的问题。那台电公司不是一个能源政策的一个制定的单位，我们是一个执行的单位。那我们知道，我们国家的一个整个电力的供应，在工业部门的用电大概以目前来讲大概接近60%。那特别整个生产是在半导体跟 AI， 特别是 AI 哈，就刚刚讲，我相信我们董事长也讲过，在未来5年，每年会有1个 gigawatt 就100万千瓦的一个用电的需求，那个是一个高度。那台电公司一定会尽力来满足这样的一个要求，但是我们也知道这些 AI 的用电呢，从国外一些先进的做法，特别是美国。它有要求这些 AI data center 它要有自备的一个电源，那我在想我们新的能源管理法也应该有这方面的一个规定跟这样的一个要求 包括它要自备电源，包括自备这个储能系统。那当然，我们公用的电网呢会提供一部分，那最重要还是当一个 backup 所以整体的应用也会这些相关的要求，我们都会持续来强化、来落实。好，这我回答你的第一个问题。那第二位先生提问的就是我们讲说台湾会全力来发展这个再生能源。其实我们过去的10年，我们再生能源的发电量增加了11倍。去年风光的发电量已经来到了295亿度，那295亿度大概占我们整体的一个发电呢，大概超过10%。那如果再这样把水力加进去，大概就接近15%哈。那我们刚刚讲台电公司会积极来协助这个再生能源的发展呢，这2个部分。第一个，再生能源的发展需要很大的一个土地，它的量体很大，它需要新的电网的建设。台电公司呢，一定会来加速各种电网的建设，让这些再生能源开发的案场都能够顺利的并网，这是第一件事情。第二件事情呢，我们知道再生能源它有间歇性，这些间歇性会造成我电力系统的不稳定。那我们怎么样来提升我们的一个稳定的能力，来允许更多再生能源的并网？那台电公司在过去3年，我们推动了电力交易平台，用新的商业模式来导入我们的储能系统，所以我们过去3年储能系统的并网的这些容量跟速度呢，是亚太地区的第1名。我们现在的一个储能系统的并网量超过200万千瓦，而且这样的一个技术呢，是在国际上受到肯定的。我们在2024年的403的大地震，花莲的大地震，那么大的一个地震呢，电力系统没有受到影响，我们的高科技产业没有受到因为这一个地震呢造成供电的中断，我们能够在第一个时间系统稳定下来，靠的就是我们有够多的储能系统。所以我们因为有储能系统，让我们的大量再生能源并网以后，我们过去所担心的频率不稳定这个问题没有在台湾发生。我们相信透过这样的一个努力，我们一定有能力允许更多再生能源的并网，来提供我们产业的一个绿电需求。谢谢。
Thank you, Vice President Wu. And I would like to maybe answer the question about potential ways to help decarbonizing our steelmaking industry and to shift back the green steel and to maybe decrease some of the power consumption demand from our semi-industry or steelmaking industry. So we will have a report coming out very soon about how Taiwan can cooperate with Australia on this regard, specifically saying that we can utilize our hydrogen energy and to provide less carbon-intensive steelmaking products and something like that. So we would love to share that report with you later. But now I would like to turn to maybe Mark. You wanted to answer the question about the Strait of Hormuz crisis?
There are a couple of things that Taiwan and the rest of the world could do to prepare for a situation where there's a blockade. One is to set up these kinds of systems we've talked about, that is the insurance for shippers, and to make everyone aware of what may be asked of them. For example, for Taiwanese flag ships, that they may be directed by the government to make certain runs, irrespective of the danger, but that they would be protected by government-provided insurance. You also have to do things for the crews, because in general you can't force them to accept danger. You can offer them, for example, premiums on their salaries. They do that now. If ships go into a dangerous area, the crews get a premium. You can increase that premium. And in fact, in our war games, we assumed a premium of $10,000 per voyage for each crew member. And the reason was that when you're fighting a war that's costing $1 billion a day and costing the world economy $10 billion a day, premiums like that, although they're very large for peacetime, really not that significant. So I think you could get enough crew members to do that. You could get the shippers to do that, and then they'll accept the risk. And some of them may be damaged. Some of them might get sunk if they were coming out of the Gulf. But that might also open the flow of supplies and oil. And I think with naval support like the U.S. Navy, that might be enough to break the blockade.
Okay, yeah, Anton, please.
This is not the energy issue, but Ukraine exports a lot of products by sea, so we also have an issue with insurances. It sounds very straightforward to do the insurance. However, we're in the 5th year of war, and I must assure you that that is an issue. Money-wise, accepting the risk, but then when there is an actual area of battlefield and when the first ships are affected, that completely changes the situation. Just to, check, you can open the radars and see how many ships are in the aquatorium of the Black Sea currently visiting Ukraine. Or you can also check how many companies will send their team members to Ukraine whatsoever. It is also an issue of insurance. I'm not saying this is impossible. I'm saying we need to come up with new mechanisms for insurance that would have not only enough coverage, but would the risk to the ship owners and to all the parties that would make it possible, because this is a very crucial issue.
And maybe an additional point to the insurance part is that we're also seeing that the U.S. has this DFC maritime reinsurance plan has already in place right after the war broke out. And then we also see the South Korea government and Korean government actually has this financial reinsurance facility also in place. And that already being affected. For example, they reinsured 10 vessels in the Strait of Hormuz to help them to continue shipping. So these are all existing mechanisms, and there are measures that Taiwan can actually learn from, and to have that in place. Also, this will be a deterrence to China as well. So I think these are all very key points. So I would like to open the floor to the audience again. We will collect 3 more questions again, and then we will reply them together. Yes, please. 赖老师。
Yeah, this question is for Mark Cancian. As just the Tsai Ing just outlined here her remarks earlier about the blockade operation on Taiwan, even 75% of Chinese shipping that will also be affected. So are the probably greater number in terms of the Korean and Japan's shippings, global shippings. So and also we do notice that after the August, the year 2022, the Chinese exercise, the rest of the Chinese exercise on Taiwan, actually they tended not to interfere the shipping themselves. So I'm just wondering that, do you do any estimate regarding the blockade operation on Taiwan, how that will affect China as well? Because we do find out that there's significant impact on China, and if that is significant, how would that reduce the incentive for China opt for the gray zone blockade operation, but instead choosing for the outright the kinematic and the high intensity warfare against Taiwan?
Thank you, Dr. Lai. So we will collect 2 more questions. Hands? Okay, maybe that lady.
Hi everyone, I'm a reporter from Commonwealth Magazine, and thank you all for just bringing this such amazing speech for us. I have 2 questions for Mr. Cancian. Because in Taiwan we are watching Hormuz closely because it shows how modern blockade can actually be carried out and might be mean for us. So I have 2 questions. First, you mentioned that Strait of Hormuz situation as a political win, but a U.S. Navy failure. So could you explain that distinction? And is it a problem of execution or preparation, or a strategic misjudgment about the Iran sea denial capability? And the second question is that, looking at the wider implication, how does the Iran war affect U.S. Army delivery to Taiwan? Is there a real risk of competition for the same limit stocks? Thank you.
Okay, final questions? Yes? I'm sorry. Is this sorry?
My question, I'm Wei Chen from Dset, and my question is for Anton. Anton spent like 30 hours to come to Taiwan from Kyiv. Before you leave, you have kind of talked to Taiwanese government officials, and so you have heard all this discussion on Taiwan energy. Before you took another kind of flight, two flights and a train for 30 hours back to Kyiv, what are the last words that you are leaving for Taiwan? And what are still puzzling you after seeing all this discussion, what the vulnerabilities you are seeing from Taiwan's energy security, and what the recommendations you will leave for Taiwanese colleagues? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I mean, I will carefully use the last word thing, but this is not the
Yes,
last word. But it's like,
before you leave.
Before you leave Taiwan. Okay, so we have multiple questions. So first three point to Mark. So the first one is, how exactly, what is the counter value to China if they actually implement a blockade to Taiwan Strait? Because obviously we saw many ships are actually bound to China's port instead of Taiwan or other countries. Second and third questions will be the Strait of Hormuz related questions. One, that you mentioned that this is not a complete failure to the U.S. Navy in terms of this war, but so she wants you to further elaborate on that point. And the third one is, how exactly this Iran war will affect the U.S. Army support to Taiwan if this happens in a short term? So please.
Okay, the first question about how a blockade would affect China, and there have been several studies that look at that, and there's no question it would significantly affect China also. There's some debate about how much China has been able to insulate itself by building inventories and by getting alternative sources of energy, for example. And all we can say is, we left it there. That is, they would also suffer. We can't, get into President Xi's head and decide how much suffering he's willing to accept. So we have to leave it there. But it's a great question, and I think some people have looked at it, but no one has really come up with a complete answer about, basically who would give up first. Would China give up first, or would Taiwan and the coalition give up first? One question was about the U.S. situation in defending Taiwan as a result of the war in Iran. We've looked at inventories of U.S. munitions. We looked at seven munitions that have been heavily used in the Gulf and would also be used in a conflict in the Western Pacific. Many of you, I think you've heard about Patriot and Tomahawk are two of the most prominent. For 4 of those, the United States has used about half the inventory, and for the other 3, about a third of the inventory. And it'll take from 1 to 4 years to replenish those inventories and get back to where we were when we started, which most people believed was inadequate for a war in the Western Pacific. So that is a tremendous vulnerability that will continue for several years. Another vulnerability is that most of the U.S. fleet is no longer in the Western Pacific. It's out in the Middle East. So there's, again, a window, although that will close when the war is over and those ships return to the Western Pacific. But I'd give you 2 thoughts about why that may cause China some caution about launching a conflict. One of them is the demonstrated skill of the U.S. military. Putting aside the Navy's failure in the Straits, the U.S. ability to strike targets in Iran, to destroy Iran's air defenses very quickly, its ability to defend against missiles and cruise missiles, not as good as we would like, but was still pretty good. What we were able to do in Venezuela, for example, what we were able to do against the Houthis, what we did against Iran and its nuclear programs with Midnight Hammer. China's very aware that it does not have any recent combat experience. And its last conflict, as you all know, was in 1979. It was against Vietnam. They did very poorly, whereas the United States has a tremendous amount of combat experience. And the other thing is the fighting over straits. The Iranians have been able to exercise a blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, even though they don't have a navy anymore. The Ukrainians have been able to exercise control over the Black Sea, even though they don't have a navy. And the Taiwanese might be able to do the same thing with their strait. And the Chinese must be thinking about that straits are more dangerous maybe than people have been thinking. And then there was the question about the failure of the U.S. Navy, and I get very angry with the U.S. Navy. Other parts of the military operation, I think, have gone very well. But when I say the U.S. Navy's been thinking about this for 45 years, they started thinking about it in the 1980s during the tanker wars when they were escorting tankers through the Persian Gulf against Iranian attacks. Those convoys were going up to Kuwait. And ever since then, the Navy has been developing plans for doing the same thing. When I was a young Marine officer, we did amphibious planning exercises to capture Keshem Island, which is in the Strait of Hormuz. Now, when the moment came, the Navy, for whatever reason, was unable to keep the strait open. Now, that might have been because of political direction. Clearly, the Department of Defense was not ready to open the strait or keep it open. And I say that because we didn't start moving the Marines until 2 weeks after the war began, and then we didn't send the second group of Marines until another week or two after that. So we did not put in place the capabilities to keep the strait open. Those capabilities are now in place. There was this, Project Freedom ran one convoy through the strait. It was relatively successful, but then it stopped. And it's possible that could start up again. But so far, the inability to keep the strait open has been the major stumbling block in coming to a conclusion or a successful conclusion from the standpoint of the United States.
Okay, final 2 minutes we will give to Anton.
Thank you very much. I must say that every moment here is worth the travel, so I'm really honored to be here. Thank you very much for having me. And I'm really inspired from what I've seen and heard over these days, indeed. And it's good to know that you went through a lot of places, not only Ukraine, I believe. Just things I'd like to amplify. To me, this race between being ready, so security race, is very much like virus and antivirus. You have to move twice as quicker to be in front. So just keep moving all the time. 2 is whenever you design something, have security in mind. So secure and resilient by design. And I'd say number 3, which is number 1, is communication. So Ukraine was able to withstand due to our servicemen, due to our military. That's what gave us time to prepare and to be able to act in crisis whatsoever. Communicating to military, communicating between each other, and what's critically important, communicating to ordinary people. So there is no panic. People know, people have their instructions, simple, readable, and very much understandable well before the crisis comes is a key. Thank you so very much.
Thank you. I think that concludes our session perfectly. Thank you all for the speakers and you joined us today.
Ladies and gentlemen, we now take another short break. Please enjoy refreshments and return by 4:25 for our final session. Thank you. Participants who are leaving, please remember to return your interpretation devices in order to collect your IDs.